Hello, everybody. I'm Jim Davis, treasurer, and this is my second rodeo, and I'm like a bad penny that just keeps coming back. Our objective today in this presentation is to provide to you, we're asking for some additional money from all the membership. So our objective today is to provide a clear picture of where we will spend that money, our rationale as to why we're asking for that money, and to talk to you about the benefits that you will receive. Finally, we're throwing a lot of information at you today, so we want to make sure that we answer any questions you come from this presentation. This is sort of a mini outline of what I'm going to go through. First, I'm going to talk about our COVID financial impact and the Paycheck Protection Program loan and how those two interplay. Then we'll go into the financial review for 2020. And lastly, we'll start talking about our financial plan for 21. First, we'll go through the operating budget, and then we'll spend a lot of time talking about our capital plan, which is really a 5-year plan. This is the Finance Committee members for this year, and I'd like to thank them all for their hard work. We spent a lot of hours this year going through both the operating budget and the capital plan. As Bill said, we have over 56 new property owners, and I think it's always good to refresh for everybody that we have two funds that we use to pay the bills here. We have an operating fund and a capital fund. The operating fund pays the day-to-day operating costs of the association, payroll, utilities, supplies, anything we consume within a year. The capital fund pays for capital asset purchases and major maintenance items, things like golf carts, golf maintenance equipment, road repaving projects, lagoon renovation projects, and facility upgrades. And one point that I need to make is we are not allowed to commingle money between these two funds. So the money that comes into the capital fund has to be for capital fund purposes. We can't use it for operating purposes. So you members, you tend to look at the assessment as one number, but you'll see we continue to try to split the two for that reason. COVID financial impact PPP loan. What is the COVID financial impact? It's basically a loss of revenue. We haven't had any guests in here since March, so we've got fewer guest fees. And the other big place that we see an impact is loss of food and beverage revenue. We've had no member events to speak of. People do not want to come in the clubhouse to some extent. We've had capacity restraints. We were actually shut down on the food and beverage operation. So we end up with lower revenue. So our financial plan had two pieces to it. One was to moderate our expenses to help offset that revenue, and the second was to bring in the PPP loan. Now, the question everybody has is, how long is this going to last? And we really can't answer that, but what we did was we decided to take a look at what happens if we are restricted like we are today through the entire 21 season. So we've taken an estimate of what that looks like. In 20, our COVID impact is $300,000, and I'll talk a little more about that. 21, we're estimating a $500,000 impact, and so the first question everybody asks me is, why is that number so much larger? Well, there's three reasons. One is we're impacted 12 months under this assumption versus 9 months of this year, and part of that 9 months of this year was a summer season where we had very little impact. It was very surprising to me, because the summer is a very low revenue period for us. A lot of people traditionally travel, so we don't plan a lot of revenue, and our expense controls actually offset what revenue losses we had. And lastly, I will tell you, this is a very conservative number. So the total impact we're projecting, assuming that we would be under restrictions through the end of the year, is $800,000. The PPP loan we got was $837,000. Part of that PPP program is a forgiveness feature. The government says if you use this money for certain eligible expenses, which we have, we'll forgive the loan. You don't have to repay it. That forgiveness becomes an income item in our accounting statements. So the loan forgiveness, we're very confident we're going to get that because we've complied with the regulations. It will offset any impacts we have through 2021. Let's go on to the 2020 numbers. This is a very high-level income statement. It excludes any potential income that comes from a PPP loan forgiveness. We have two lines here, member assessments. That's the money that you pay for our operation, to fund our operating, that operating fund that I talked about earlier. And our forecast and budget is the same. Net expenses, that's simply the net spending when you add everything together of what it costs to run the association. So our forecast says it's going to cost us $6,578,000 this year. Our plan was $6,278,000. We have a $300,000 variance. So this is what when I talk about it, this is our COVID impact. We have less expenses, and actually, or less revenue, I should say. We actually had $600,000 of less revenue. We dropped our expenses about $300,000. The net effect is $300,000. So we will have a deficit excluding any PPP forgiveness of that amount. Let's go on to 2021. First, we ought to talk about board priorities. First priority is COVID safety. Our first mission is to keep the membership and our staff safe. Maintenance of assets. I'm going to talk a lot about this through the rest of my presentation, both in our operating plan and in our capital plan. Strategic plan initiatives. In 2018, we started working on a strategic plan. We developed a lot of initiatives which could end up with some new amenities. We need to bring this whole area to a conclusion, and that's our goal for this year. Governance revisions. In 2019, we set up a governance committee to review our governance documents. They've come up with a series of recommendations, and again, we are going to try and bring that to a conclusion. We will bring that to a conclusion this year. So here's probably the most important slide for everybody. What are we asking for? On the operating assessment, we're looking at a $760 per member increase, which is almost 7%. And on the capital assessment, we're looking at a $325 increase, which is 16%. Understand that 16% is sort of a false number. We haven't raised this in over 4 years, so that number is going to be a lot higher percentage-wise. But total per member, we're asking for an increase of $1,085. That equates out to you for about $90 per month and would take our total assessment to $13,950. So let's go into the operating budget assumptions. First, we've talked about this over the years, and especially this year. Even with the economic effects of COVID, we still have a very tight labor market in Hilton Head. And we've had trouble this year keeping our department staffed. So there's two things. We have a cost of living adjustment, and that's 3%. But to keep our department staffed, we're looking at market adjustments in certain departments, and that equates out to about 2.3%. And those departments that were having trouble was golf maintenance, security, and to some extent kitchen. We simply have to compete on labor to keep the department staffed. The other places we're looking at adding spending is in the common grounds, facilities, and golf course. And we'll go into that in more detail later. So here's a summary look at our 21 budget operations, very high level. Member assessments, this is the money that we bring in from you to pay for our operating budget. $6,279,000 this year. We're going up by $433,000 to $6,712,000. So I talked earlier about an increase of $760 per member. There are 570 dues paying members, so 570 times 760 gets you the 433. The net expenses, that 433 will be applied to the increases that I've talked about or will talk about. And so basically we're budgeting a break-even budget. Let's talk about that $433,000. Where's it going? So the first two items on this chart are salary, COLA, which is cost of living adjustments, $175,000. Salary market adjustments, $137,000. The total of those two is $312,000. The next biggest item is the increases in common grounds, facilities, and golf course, and that's $272,000. We have some inflation in non-payroll items like insurance, that's $57,000. And in addition to increases, though, we have gone back through our budget and looked in the non-payroll area, and we identified $109,000 of costs that we could take out of our budget. We're looking at a couple fee increases. One is our Our guest fee for golf rounds, we haven't changed that in 12 years. There'll be a slight change there. And then we're looking at increasing our gate fees. So this is the $433,000 that we're looking at for this year's budget. Increased spending on the common grounds, as I indicated, there's 3 areas. This shows you where the dollars are going in each of those areas. 73 for the common grounds, 102 for facilities, 97 for the golf course. So that's your breakdown of the 272, and Leon is now going to go through where that money is going to be used.
You know, it's rare that you'll hear a general manager use excitement and budget in the same sentence. But I'm excited about this budget because I think it's going to have a significant impact on the quality of life, the presentation, and the overall value of our community. It's divided into 3 specific areas primarily. Our common grounds, I use the word facilities, but what I'm really referring to is housekeeping, and the golf course itself. With the enhanced community appearance, we all benefit. Everyone benefits. From the facilities perspective and housekeeping, what could be more important, particularly during COVID-19, than the cleanliness and appearance of our facilities? And third, our most valuable physical asset, the golf course itself. So I'm telling you right now, we're looking forward to applying these funds in these areas and getting the results that we hope we can describe right here. I'm going to take an initiative and objective-based approach to this. I'm going to tell you specifically what the initiatives are, and then I'm going to tell you what the objectives of those initiatives will be. First, in the area of common grounds, you probably have seen on number 3 the fact that we have cleared that lagoon of a significant amount of overgrowth and brush. What's happened, and that's a good example, we did that as an example of what the community could look like. It has enhanced the lagoon's appearance. It's opened up the sight lines and the vistas from a golf perspective and from a visual perspective. It's widened the views of the homes. I don't mean that you see the homes. I mean that the homes have a better view of the facilities that they see and the beautiful, beautiful vistas that they see. And then the third thing is it decreases the erosion on our lagoon's edges. One of the reasons we invest so much money into our lagoon's maintenance program is the challenge of erosion. So when we get the plants cleared away from the edges, it keeps us from experiencing as much erosion from those plants. I'm going to show you a picture here which will give you an example of that. This is on 3 what it looked like. And we have this appearance all over our community from years and years and years of not spending the money to clear the lagoon banks. When we completed that work, it looks like this. Everything is cut back, trimmed back, and you have a very, very visible edge and a completely enhanced appearance. The next area is increased tree trimming and vine control in our communities along the roads. The standard for emergency vehicles is 13 feet of clearance. We were overgrown tremendously here on Long Cove Drive, and we need to cut that back. We need to give it a uniform appearance using 13 feet as the standard, and we need to clear vines. The storms from the last few years, the last 5 years, have opened up our canopy. And because of the increased sunlight, it's created a couple management control issues. Harold's back there in the back of the room sitting next to Ashley, and he's inherited a tremendous challenge due to the increased canopy. And so we need to remove the vines so that we can protect our healthy trees. Because if we don't get the vines off of our healthy trees, the trees will die. And our community, in order to protect that beauty and that asset, we need to be very, very aggressive on our tree and vine management. So basically, It's going to look better from the roads. We're going to protect our trees, and we're going to manage our canopy so that we can balance both this increased sunlight with our weed control and our vine control. The third area is cul-de-sac management. This community is, you've heard me speak to Mr. Ames' vision and how incredible it is, but we still, even with that tremendous vision, have a few challenges, and one of them is where we have these cul-de-sacs and turn points, it's very, very, very tight. And so what happens is our service vehicles, trash removal, moving vans, things of that nature, damage the edges of the cul-de-sac. That breaks away. The pavers are damaged and they're constantly in a state of repair. In addition to that, the cul-de-sac itself, we haven't maintained those to the standard that we should. The cul-de-sacs do not have irrigation. There's no irrigation. So we want to have a crisp, uniform look, absent the ability to provide irrigation to any plantings that are there. And it's important that we do this now because we have some major road work going on this coming spring. And the cul-de-sac work will complement the road work and make all of our community look better. I want to show you a picture of what a cul-de-sac should look like. You can see that there's no damage beyond the wear and tear on the road, that the berms of that cul-de-sac are solid, but more importantly, we have a nice planting in the middle, well maintained, and we have solid growth of turf grass there. And this is the appearance we'd like to have. It's not a manicured appearance, so to speak, but it is a natural appearance that can be maintained effectively over a long period of time. And we don't have very many cul-de-sacs that look like that. So that's going to make a big difference in our community. Facilities. I'm going to throw some numbers out, and I'd just like you to think in terms of how you maintain your own home and the square footage you have in your home. We maintain 6 buildings and 18 restrooms just for member use. In addition to that, we have nearly 50% more square footage and restrooms for staff use. We had 2.5 employees dedicated to that task. Organizationally, in the whole campus, we had 2.5 employees responsible for 24 restrooms in total, 18 used by the members, 6 buildings. What we've done is we have tried to establish what I would consider a fair level of staffing in order to meet the expectations and the standards that our community should have, which is 5 employees in that area, and the equivalency using an outsourced housekeeping organization of 5 employees. What this will do, it will double the depth and frequency of cleaning all the member areas. The restrooms are cleaned in the morning, but if you have a 1 o'clock tea time and you're out using the restrooms at 2 or 3 or 4, the presentation simply doesn't meet the standard. This will allow us to do restrooms twice a day. Incidentally, if you're playing golf today, we're going to keep the tee open once this meeting, till the meeting's completed, so that you can get out in the golf course. Bob wanted me to remind you of that. So it doubles the depth of the frequency and cleaning of all member areas, building-wise, restroom-wise. And that couldn't be more important than it is right now. We're not doubling the frequency of the employee areas. We're keeping the same frequency of the employee areas. The next area is our golf course. If you ask the members in Hilton Head Island, the managers on Hilton Head Island, or even off the island, what the single biggest challenge we face, staffing. The further you are away from the areas that most employees live, that work on all of these restaurants, golf courses, gated communities, the further away you are from the places that those folks live, the more challenging it is to hire staff. Well, that makes it most challenging where we are. So what we're going to do, we've instituted all sorts of incentives, programs, and activities that have helped us retain our staff, but we need to make a commitment, a strong commitment, to trying to meet the standard of expectations, understanding we're always going to be confronted with staff problems. So this is a partnership where we outsource significant portions of our responsibilities, and I'm going to go through those quickly. On the golf course itself, landscaping the edges of some of our cart paths, tree pruning, root pruning, pine straw application, verticutting, and vacuuming post-verticutting of our fairways, particularly during our summer closures. The beautification of our non-playing areas, and as I mentioned before, it's just as important on the golf course to maintain vine control and protect our trees. The next slide is an indication of the professional partners with which we have aligned and will align ourselves, some of which we've worked with in the past and will work with more intensely, some of which are new partners. But these are the folks that we're going to utilize on a contract labor basis, particularly during our summer closure, but at other times throughout the year. What that's going to allow us to do is hopefully utilize our staff in an assignment that's dedicated toward greater attention to detail on our golf course in a wide range of areas. We want to be able to use our skill level people versus our outsourced people to do specific tasks versus working on the tasks that we're contracting to have done. This will allow us to increase the frequency of the mowing on our tees, on our fairways, and on our approaches. It will allow us to maintain the interior and the exterior of our bunkers at a higher level. It will increase our seasonal green speeds. We live in a climate and we go through overseed and we go through a number of practices agronomically that change the conditions of our greens during the course of the year. None more dramatic than the weather itself. But from a seasonal perspective, we'd like to have a greater consistency of green speed in each particular season. We'd like to, for those of us that do not hit the ball in the fairway, we'd like to improve our root, rut, and weed control, providing smoother straw beds. We'd like to get our staff to pay greater attention to provide a safer and more consistent hitting surface if you haven't put the ball in the fairway and you're playing it from the edges. We'd also like to increase the frequency of edging and blowing, our ability to maintain our love grass beds, which have been a challenge. I'm going to touch on that a little bit greater depth. And also to do in-house small sod projects or areas of turf weakness that we can address and have a labor intensity that would produce a better product. If you go to the love grass beds on the last few holes of the front side, they have become, at times, extremely overgrown. And if you look at the intent of what those areas were to produce, we're violating that intent through the intensity of growth. The real picture we would like to have out there is the next one. The next picture, in essence, has a natural presentation with some sand, with some intermittent love grass pockets. They're not planted in a systematic way. It looks the way it should. And from a playing perspective, the dies never intended for any ball to go in that area to necessarily be a lost ball. They certainly viewed it as a hazard. Pete Dye he'll tell you about hazards. He would have told you about hazards, and he made it very, very clear that this area was supposed to be a penalty but not a lost ball. It's supposed to be about a 50% chance of finding your ball and about a reasonable chance to advance your ball. The equivalency of a half-shot penalty during the average round of play if you hit it into that area. So we're going to use our staff to try to get the presentation we want in those areas. So in summary, accountability level higher in all areas, financial commitment on the part of the members necessary in order to pay for these improvements, but most importantly, an opportunity to manage to our mission statement and to produce the product and the services and the facilities that are outlined clearly in our mission statement. And we're excited about that opportunity from an organization. I've got leaders sitting in the back and leaders sitting to my left, and we're excited about that opportunity, and I thank you for that.
I mean, Leon taught me a long time ago that one of his beliefs is he's always trying to enhance the member's experience. And what we just talked about on the golf course is to enhance the golfing experience for the members. So with that, let's go on to the, I get my slides, sorry. We got to go to the capital plan for 2020 to 2024. So for those of you who do not know, we actually have a planning system for capital that extends out 20 years. We lay out every asset we have and look out for 20 years as to when they need to be replaced or do major maintenance on. We are going to talk, though, about a 5-year period, not 20, because 5 years we have a much better visibility of what's going to happen. And the 5-year period is through 2020 through 2024. Background, last year, a proposed increase to the annual capital assessment was made to the membership, and it was rejected. That proposal had 3 features to it: fund replacement and maintenance of existing assets, pre-fund the 2025 golf irrigation system replacement. There was no money for new amenities, but that wasn't clear to the membership. There was a lot of confusion among the members. We had people thought we were funding a health club and all sorts of things. So after that rejection, the Finance Committee began a reevaluation of our approach. So our proposal and approach for this year, for 2021, is fund replacement and maintenance of existing assets. This is our primary focus. There's no funding for the 2025 replacement of the Gulf irrigation system. The philosophy in this community for years has been a pay-as-you-go system, and it was, when you need money, let me know, I'll give it to you. Right or wrong, that's what we've been dealing with. And I think that was reflected in that rejection vote. People did not want to pre-fund that irrigation system. We've taken that out. No funding for the strategic initiatives that would provide new amenities. So hopefully you have a clear view that the money we're requesting is to maintenance and replacement of existing assets over this period of time. This chart shows you the money that would come into the capital fund for this 5-year period based on the existing assessment levels and initiation fee charges. On the annual capital assessment, currently we charge $1,850 per member, and that would bring in $5,273,000 over this 5-year period. Initiation fees, for talking purposes, I'm going to use $20,000. In 2020, we're going to have roughly 47 transactions. That will bring in $934,000. That 47 transaction is the second highest level we've had in almost 12 years. For the next 4 years, 21 through 24, our assumption is 25 transactions. That's a very key assumption. I'm going to talk a little more about it. That would bring in, over this 4-year period, another $2 million. So the total that we have coming in using our existing assessment levels and initiation fees is $8.2 million. Talk a little more about the initiation fees. This chart shows you, the bars here show you the actual initiation fee, the number of transactions that occurred each year back to 2002. And you can see how we were going pretty good early on, and then we hit the worst recession in 50 years. And then about 2012, things started to recover, and you can see the last couple of years have been very good. The red line on this chart is the last 10-year average of all these transactions, and it's 31. And historically, we've used that 10-year number as our planning assumption. But because of the lack of inventory of houses and lots on the market, the Finance Committee thought it would be prudent to drop it down to 25. So we're using 25. And I talked to Christy again. We do have people right now that would like to buy in here. They simply can't find the property that they're looking for. Let's talk about spending now. And again, we're talking existing assets. We've got two categories we divide our spending into on existing assets. We call it routine asset replacement. Those are assets where they have an individual price less than $100,000 and generally have a useful life less than 10 years. Major projects greater than $100,000, useful life generally greater than 10 years. So this chart shows you what's in our plan for the next 5 years, at 2020 through 2024. Routine asset replacement, $4,870,000, almost $1 million a year. It goes just to replace golf carts, copiers, computers, all the miscellaneous things that we own. Major projects, the biggest number we have in our projections is roads for $1.8 million. We've got 3 big road projects slotted in. The first one would be in 21, $800,000. It would repave 26 of our existing interior roads. And then we've got 2 $500,000 projects, one in 23, one in 24, and we would start to repave Long Cove Drive. Lagoons renovation. A long time ago, I think 10 or 12 years ago, we set up a plan to renovate our lagoons. We've got 2 lagoons slotted in this next 4 years. The one is the big lagoon just to the right of hole 1, and then it wraps around hole 2, and that would be targeted, I think, in 23. And the other big lagoon is to the left of hole 3. So you can see that those lagoons take a tremendous amount of money, and we thought it would be prudent to reevaluate our approach to the lagoons given the amount of money we're spending. So Bill mentioned earlier we've set up a separate committee to study that. They're just starting, and they will finish their work by the end of the year. I don't know if that will change our approach to the lagoons or money, but right now this is what we have slotted. Sports Center, 2 small projects, replace the tennis court lights and replace the fencing. And the golf maintenance building, we've targeted a refurbishment of $186,000. So if you look at this 5-year period, we're really looking at roads and lagoons. No other big projects. And I want to mention one thing. There's a word called studies. We're going to talk about strategic initiatives. We do have about $89,000 targeted in this 5-year period to do studies that we need to do to vet the strategic initiatives and to be able to talk intelligently and allow you to make an intelligent decision about whether you want to go forward with them. Debt service, $500,000. We paid off the clubhouse loan, and all we have left is about $300,000 on the golf course renovation. This is the lowest debt level we've had in probably 10 years. So here's the summary. We're bringing in, cash-wise, on our current money, $8.2 million. Our spending plan is 9.4, or $1.2 million short. Now, our capital planning system identified this issue as far back as 2016. And we told the membership that this was coming. And we told the membership that we would have to address it in 2020. We're here now in 2021 to address it again. Conclusion, current revenue streams do not provide sufficient funds for proposed spending. So what are our options? We can defer maintenance and spending on existing assets, or we can increase revenue. We have 2 sources to do that, initiation fees and our annual capital assessment. The Finance Committee and the board has concluded that deferral is not in accordance with our mission statement and will make the ultimate cost more expensive. We don't think that's the right path to go down. So let's talk about additional revenue sources. Initiation fees, they complement our member capital assessments. The current amount was set in 2008, has not been changed since then. The inflation and indexed fee would be $23,500. and we are now at the lower end of comparable local clubs. So this chart shows you Long Cove currently versus some other clubs that we tend to compare ourselves to. We're at $20,000. Wexford is about only $300 above us, and our intelligence on what's going on at Wexford has been limited because there's some changes going on over there. Berkeley Hall's at 23. They want to go higher. We've been told that they have a covenant restriction that prevents them from raising their initiation fee. They are going to put out a referendum to change that covenant so they can raise it. Belfair just raised theirs to $29,000. Colleton's at $35,000. 5 years ago, if I did this chart, we all looked pretty close together. So we're at the lower end. So our funding recommendations to pay for the spending we want to do for existing assets primarily for the 21 through 24 period is effective the 1st of 21, we're asking for an increase in the initiation fee of $5,000. That would take homes up to $25,000, individual lots to $24,900. This particular change on initiation fee is a covenant change, and it has a higher threshold for approval. We need a 75% affirmative vote on votes that are cast. It's important that you understand that, because if we don't get that change and we don't get that approval, we need more money from the members. The annual capital assessment recommendation is an increase of $325. That would take us up to $2,175 per year. As I indicated earlier, we have not changed this fee since 2017. It's 4 years. And if you index that for inflation, we'd be at $2,000. This is what each of these changes would bring in. The increase in initiation fees would bring in $500,000 over the next 4 years. The increase in the annual capital assessment would bring in $741,000, or a total of $1.2 million. So this is how we're funding our gap. It might be interesting to you, the percentage of money coming in between the two sources, 40% for initiation fees, 60% from the membership, current membership, and that's pretty close to where we've historically been. Let's talk about projected capital reserve balances. If you approve these changes, this is what our capital reserves would look like. We started this year at $1,200,000. We're going to go up slightly because we deferred our big major project, which was a road project, into 22. So we're looking at about $1.4 million this year. Next year, we've got the big road project. That'll bring our reserves back down to $1.2 million. And in 22, we'd go up to $1.5 million as we're building some money, as we have a road project and a lagoon project in 23. And we end up the period at $1.2 million. The Finance Committee, in reviewing where they think the capital reserve balance, feels we should be around that $1.2 million, $1.3 million number. And we don't mind from a planning standpoint if we drop down a little plus or minus, because that's what happened because of some of the intensity of our major projects. Well, I've talked a lot about 4 and 5 years, and now I want to narrow it down to what are we going to spend this coming year. Routine asset replacement is the bulk of the money. It's $1.1 million, a little higher than what I said our 5-year average would be. That's mainly a timing of golf maintenance equipment. And we're doing 2 bridges next year on the golf course. Capital projects in excess of $100,000. There's one, the road project. Debt service, $110,000. Some miscellaneous money, $65,000. So we're looking at spending next year is $2,028,000. Just for a reference point, this year we're going to spend $1.5 million. So you can see we're going to spend more money next year. So I've tried to paint a picture of where we want to spend our money and to make sure that you understand it's going for existing assets. No pre-funding for an irrigation system, no significant money for new amenities coming out of the strategic initiatives. But let's talk what lies ahead. We have to talk about those 2 issues. Irrigation system, just for your information, we plan to replace it, our Gulf irrigation system in 25. Total estimated cost is $2.3 million. Funding plan will be decided in 23 and 24 to how to deal with that project. There is no money in our plan for that project in the next 5 years, or 4 years coming up. I know I sound like a broken record, but I'm trying to make it very clear to everybody. Strategic initiatives, next step. So in 2018, we started our strategic planning process. We developed a list of initiatives. COVID totally interrupted our plan to conclude this area. But the process we have to go through is, I call finalize or define the scope. What are we looking to do? What's that project look like, or that initiative? We have to get estimates of what that project's going to cost, or that initiative. Because not only does the board need it to make a decision, you as the members need to know what the cost is so you can give a input to us. We're coming to you for input on this. There's been no decisions on these initiatives. And lastly, depending on the input, the board will make some decisions about whether we would bring it to the community for potential referendums. What's the timing look like? Spring of 21, the first three we're going to bring to you and talk about is the leisure path, outdoor dining, and I'm going to call it a combination system, the golf teaching center, and the practice area. Fall of 21, we're going to look at the rest of the initiatives that are going to be determined by the Strategic Planning Committee. Any amenities, new amenities that are coming out of these initiatives are not funded, and it will need additional money for what I've talked about today. So I hope that's clear. We do have some specific referendums I thought we'd mention. Mid-November, we'll have a referendum with 3 ballot items. One is a recommendation to increase the operating assessment by $760, increase the annual capital assessment by $325, and increase the initiation fee by $5,000. The initiation fee, again, will take a 75% approval. The first two only take a majority approval. In late December, after we get through that first referendum, we'll come back to you for the road project of $819,000. That money is funded. There'll be no more money needed for that project. And in the spring of 21, governance revisions, we've had a committee that started in 19. They've developed recommendations. The next step is to sit down with the community and have informational meetings and get your input on what you think of those recommendations. After that input, the board will reassess their recommendations, and then we'll decide what will be included in that referendum that will be voted on sometime in the spring. We want to put this to bed. Summary of annual assessments. As I indicated, $760 for the operating increase, $325 for the annual capital increase. And I didn't say something earlier, but I'm going to try and say it now. Our plan is that we will not need any more money other than these increases as we look at the next 4 years. And I'm talking specifically about new or existing assets. So I hope everybody understands what I just said. So that money, we talked about it. We need to be competitive on our labor to make sure our departments are staffed. We're trying to improve the appearance and the members' experience of the community. So, and I think this reflects a strong commitment by both the board and management to live up to our mission statement. Let's look at that. Second item on this mission statement, unwavering commitment to excellence, check. Improving respect for golf course, check. Sound financial planning, we've done that. And employ capable and dedicated professional staff, and it really is all staff, check. So I am positive that if you will approve these recommendations, we will have a community that is a better place to live in. Thank you for your time.